Hey everyone, so I wanted to make a video to go over the Milestone 2 submission, the guidelines and rubric, the same way that I made the video for Milestone 1. So I know that sometimes these rubrics and guidelines can feel a little bit vague and you may not be sure exactly what direction to go in. So hopefully by making this video, it will help answer any questions that you have. If you haven't asked those already, and give you a little bit more guidance on kind of where to go with this. So if you've already submitted your Milestone 2 project at this point, by the time that this is uploaded, what I would encourage you to do is to watch the video in its entirety, compare what you've done to the things that I cover in this video, and if needed, to go back and make changes to Milestone 2 and then resubmit that. So again, even if you've already submitted that, technically you have until 11:59 p.m. this Sunday. So you have essentially over 48 hours at this point to make any changes, go back, submit it. And I always grade the most recent submission. So if I see that you made a second submission or a third submission, I'm going to typically look at the most recent one. So just be aware of that you can always go back, you can make another submission, and at this point you wouldn't get any type of penalty because the assignment isn't due yet. So right now I have the Milestone 2 guidelines and rubric pulled up. So we'll start off here with the section on prompt. So this says to submit a 2 to 3 page draft of your care plan intervention section addressing all of the critical elements that are listed in section 2 below using the template that's provided. So something that I noticed with Milestone 1 is that most people did use the template like I had instructed you in the video that I uploaded, but there were some people who did not. Typically, whenever people don't use the template, the first issue is that it leads to all of the elements not being addressed appropriately. The template, again, is here to help make things easier on you because it has the questions listed out for you explicitly. It has exactly what you need to be covering laid out right there for you. So that's the first thing, is that it's really meant to be a tool to help make things easier for you, because all you have to do is download it and then save it and type into it. You don't have to worry about formatting anything. So all you have to do is add a cover page if that's something that's necessary based on the guidelines, and then add your reference page at the end. So it really takes a lot of time and stress off of you by using the template. The second part is that it's given in the instructions, and so you should use it not because it's only going to make things easier, but because it's clearly spelled out here to use the template that is provided to you. So this last go around, again, there were some people who didn't do that. This time, if you don't use the template, I'm going to automatically reject it and ask you to go and put the work into the template. So just be mindful of that. It asks you to use it. It's going to ask you on all of the milestones to use the template that's provided. At this point, that should be very clear. So this is the second time that I'm reviewing that. So just know that if you've already submitted it and you haven't used the template, then you need to go back. You need to copy, paste the information into that template and submit it that way. Because again, if I start grading the assignments and see that it's not in the template, I'm going to send you an email and say, hey, please put the information in the template, resubmit it, and then I'm going to grade it. So just know that. So the second thing that it talks about here is that the draft should be based on the case study and care plan provided in the final project guidelines and rubric prompt. So something else that happened with a few submissions for Milestone 1 is that people did not base the assignment off of the case study. So again, this is super, super important that you base each of these milestones assignments off of this case study and care plan that's listed here in the final project guidelines and rubric. So just be aware of that as you're doing this, that it should be based off of this case study and care plan. Okay. And so what you're doing in this milestone is you're going to examine and analyze the proposed interventions for the family. So these interventions must not only be appropriate for an individual's trauma needs, but you're also going to be looking at, do the proposed interventions follow legal and ethical guidelines? So what you will notice is that if you go back over here to the case study and care plan, you're going to see in this section right here that there are 6 interventions and referrals that have been recommended by the state's Department of Children and Family Services. So for Milestone 2, you're going to specifically be looking at each of these interventions and looking at, okay, do these follow legal guidelines that are given out that are applicable to this case? Do the interventions follow ethical guidelines that are given by different organizations? So we'll talk more about that in a minute, but are these legally and ethically appropriate? If they are, why? And how might they not be? So there are going to be some questions over here that will help you kind of determine that. So what you're going to do is review appropriate literature and other relevant information to determine the legal requirements in this case, and also examine code of ethics to see which apply in this case scenario and how to match ethics with appropriate interventions. And as I noted in the Milestone 1 video, I'm going to give you feedback on this draft that you're going to incorporate into your final paper as you make changes to this section of the project. So down here, just something to note, which at this point you should already know, but just as a reminder, this milestone is a starting point for the care plan intervention section of the final case study and care plan evaluation. You're going to use the feedback that I give you to shape your final submission. So if you look down here, it goes over what to submit. So the draft of your care plan, okay, is going to be submitted using the template that's provided using 12-point Times New Roman font, any sources cited in APA format. So just as a reminder about formatting, there have been a couple things that have come up with citations. Anytime you utilize information and you paraphrase it, you quote it directly, you copy and paste it, you have to provide a citation for that. Okay, if there's work that's being submitted in an assignment of yours and it is not original completely to you, then you have to make sure and cite it, because you're giving credit to the person that originally came up with this, or you're giving credit to the source where you found it. So this is really, really, really critical that you have to cite any information that is not original. And so you want to try to find a good balance in your assignments between demonstrating your own understanding of the material, but also utilizing references and making sure that you always give appropriate credit. If there are, several issues throughout a submission where it's obvious that information is not original to you, but there's no citation being given, that's something that we're going to have a discussion about. And so I would rather it be something that is addressed from the get-go, or it to not even be an issue necessarily, because I don't want to have that conversation, right? So if you're ever questioning if you should cite something, you probably should. And the general thing that I tell students always is it's better to cite it and not necessarily needed to have cited it than to need a citation for it and not give it, because at that point then it kind of looks like maybe you might be trying to pass something off as your own that isn't. So just be really aware of that. And if I do, come to you with a question about citations, it's not to get you in trouble. It's just to make sure that you have a good understanding of, hey, if this information isn't original to you, we need to cite it, right? Because it's in line with APA format. It's, unfair to not cite things when someone else has taken the time to come up with something. So I'm sure you heard all of this before, but just really try to be mindful of that as you're as you're kind of drafting your submissions. So down here, you'll see the rubric. And again, this is what I'm going to use as I grade the assignment. So we've already been over what articulation of response looks like in the first video that I did. So each of these criteria are specific to this assignment in particular, this milestone, and these are the sections. So you can either get 0% of the possible points, 75%, or 100%. Something that I've had, some people ask about has to do with the big difference in the percentages up here. This isn't something that I can control. The rubric is given out by the university. I have to use the rubric that's given and not make any changes to the amount of points that are applied. So you're going to notice that not evident is 0% and needs improvement is 75%. That's a huge difference in the percentage of points, right? So there's nothing though that I can do about that. If your submission looks like it's kind of between these two areas, but maybe on this critical element it's more towards not evident, then I have to choose not evident. And unfortunately, I can't go in and give you 25% of the points available or 50% of the points. So that's something to be really aware of, is that there is a big difference here in the amount of points that you get, but that's something that unfortunately can't be changed. And so that's why you really need to make sure that you are falling in line with, at the very least, the needs improvement category, because that's a big difference, right? So just be mindful of that. Let's see. Okay, so now we are going to look at the critical elements that need to be addressed. So again, it's asking you to explain the interventions present in the case and how they address levels of crisis. So if you looked at, let's see, okay, so it's not this one, but if you looked at the announcement post, the second announcement post that I made this week, you're going to notice that there's a video that's been uploaded or linked in that announcement post that has to do with primary, secondary, and tertiary intervention. So if you're having trouble understanding the difference in those, take a look at that video. Make sure that you look at the readings and resources for Module 4. There is a reading here that supports Milestone 2. It explains the differences in primary, secondary, and tertiary intervention. So you have this to go off of. You also have the video that I uploaded that was from YouTube that talks about the differences here. So that's going to help explain what all of that means. Here, you'll also notice that tip 59 is given as a required reading, and that booklet will help support Milestone 2. So that's something else that you need to definitely review in addition to chapter 4, okay, which is also really going to help in terms of the discussion that you have due this week. So if we go over here, again, you can see each of the areas that you're going to be asked to review. So the first has to do with looking at the interventions that align with, do they align with legal standards? Okay, what legal standards are applicable to this case? How do the interventions take that into consideration? Are there places where interventions don't align? So you're going to answer those questions related to legal standards. Then you're going to answer that question in relation to ethical guidelines. So over here for Module 3, I uploaded 3 links that have to do with identifying different ethical principles or boundaries according to some different disciplines' code of ethics. So these will also be helpful with Milestone 2. So when you get to the part that talks about ethics, what you can do is go to any one of these 3 links and look at the National Organization of Human Services and their code of ethics, the NASW code of ethics, and then the American Counseling Association code of ethics. And you can utilize a combination of those. You can utilize one of them, you can utilize none of them, and find another professional organization's code of ethics. But that's a place to get you started when it comes to looking at ethical guidelines and how they relate to this case. And again, remember that you're looking at the legal standards and ethical guidelines as they relate to these interventions that are listed over here in the case study and care plan. So these 6 things. So we've looked at the required resources and readings that are going to help you with Milestone 2. We've looked at what you're asked to submit, so we've got all that covered. So now what we're going to do is we are going to go down here and we're going to look at the template. So this is the template that you should be submitting for Milestone 2 that's completed. So what you'll do is then you'll also add a reference page. So right now this is 2 pages without any information added. You'll add in a reference page in APA format, just following those guidelines. So this is what it looks like before you have any information on here. So again, it talks about here, this is simply a template. Every agency is going to have a different template that they use for a care plan, or they may have no template at all. So this is just an example of what one might look like. So when the assignment is completed, this is what it should look like. So this is, let's see. Actually, I'm going to click off of this really quick because that has some information on there that has a student's name. So let's think about how we can do this. What I'll do is I will go back to that. I'll try to take some screenshots of that and then upload it as a part of this post so you can see what it should look like, okay? Because we want to make sure that I'm not putting up any student's information that doesn't need to be there. So once I upload those screenshots, you can go and look at that and see what a completed Milestone 2 should look like. And so that submission was a submission that got an A. So obviously you have to submit your own work, so you can't look at that and then copy that work exactly, because obviously that's going to be a problem, right? So I would encourage you though to look at those screenshots to give you an idea of what a good submission will look like. So at this point, I think we've covered all of the high points for this submission. So at this point, again, if you've already made your submission and you notice that there are some issues with it based on what I've just covered in this video, then please go back, make changes, and then submit that before Sunday night. If you have any questions based on this video, then you need to get up with me, ask those questions so that you can get an answer to that and be able to incorporate that information again by the deadline. So please remember, you can always reach out to me if there's something you're unsure of. It's better to ask than to not know, wing it on the assignment, and then there be a problem. So please reach out if you have any questions, and thanks for watching.